ask questions at any time.
I have my staff here, and of course we don't want to monopolize the questions. If anybody has questions, that'd be fine. But my real concern and my interest is, what can we do to encourage the kind of things you guys are talking about? As you could tell from my opening comments, I wasn't even familiar with what LEAD meant, but we have introduced a number of bills in Congress. I've sponsored a number myself that creates tax incentives and tax credits for industries to move in an energy efficient way and in construction in an environmentally safe way. But what I'd like to know is, what, if anything, can you gentlemen suggest, since you're in the business, and maybe the next panel as well, what can you suggest that we could do in Washington or here in the state at the governor's level, the governor's office, or at the city level? We got Mayor Ballard and our colleague Mayor from Carmel, I think, is here as well. Don't we have someone here from Carmel?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And we'd like to know what we can do at the state, local, and federal level to enhance this sort of thing, because I think I said 70 billion, well, it's 700 billion that we're sending overseas, and that's hundreds of thousands of jobs just in energy alone. So I'd like to know what you might suggest that we could do to speed up this process and encourage more of these things.
Well, there's a number of initiatives at the federal level. There's a number of initiatives that have been talked about here at the state level. Obviously, the city of Indianapolis is addressing it through their Green Print Commission, and Mayor Ballard's just announced a renewed effort.
Do we have anything in writing on that? Just like my staff?
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever suggestions you have that might already be in writing that we could take with us and take a look at.
There's a Green Schools Caucus, for example, in Congress, which you could sign on to that. You probably got lots of caucuses, but this is one of the fastest growing groups at the Congress level. There's the Green Act, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that's involving now, with the financial situation the way it is, it's based on incentives to mortgage companies to provide low-cost mortgages for urban development in areas where there's public transit. So building close to bus lines, rail lines, and as we continue our conversation in this part of Indiana about the possibility of maybe some commuter rail and things like that, it would be a great complement to encourage development along like a commuter rail line, for example. So that's called the Green Act. I've got information on that if you'd like that. And then Bill's probably the best person to talk about at the state level, and Frank has a comment here too.
Yeah, one of the things is I've done several new projects, working on some more right now. And the biggest issues that I'm seeing is the ignorance, and that's not a bad thing. It just means people don't know. People think that green is for, not for them. But when you look at a cost, when you look at economic benefits, there's a tremendous amount of benefits to build green. And all building green just means is you're building high performance. You're building high performance buildings, and you're having a huge amount of return on investment for that. Currently right now, and I just got done with the home show, we've had probably about 16,000 people come through. I would say 95% of them still did not even know what green was, and they could walk through the home and still not see on our LEED certified home what it actually meant until they talked to me. And I could tell them, hey, listen, on this home we were able to reduce utility bills by 50 to 80%. We're able to reduce the water consumption by 40%. We've eliminated most of the VOCs and formaldehydes. It's a healthy home. It has the highest indoor air quality because of fresh air return systems. And literally went down the line, and they were in total amazement.
So it's an educational process. It's
an educational process. It's a grass level campaign. If I can go ahead and steal that from a lot of the political people out there. It truly is. And the thing of it is, we can talk about, what's been done on federal levels and so forth. And it's a thing that has to be on a grassroots level to educate the people, to get people involved, and on top of that, within the industry as well, too. One of the biggest things, I talked to, my neighbor who's vice president for one of the largest construction firms in the country. And one of the things that he indicated to me is they don't like building green. Why? One is because of typically when they go ahead and build green, it doesn't, their perception is increasing the cost, but they're doing it for an investor who's going to go ahead and do it with a triple net lease. Okay, triple net lease means the tenant pays for everything. So if it's increasing the cost by 2%, 3%, they're not going to see that because the tenant takes care of everything anyway. Okay, now if it's a state building, obviously it's owner occupied. Now there's a huge benefit because you have a major reduction, because it's, again, owner occupied, major reduction in utility bills and operating costs. We're looking at doing one project alone, and I'm looking to do a green commercial project. And just by doing a green, I can reduce my operating costs by $110,000 a year. That's significant savings.
Now imagine greening the Rayburn building and lowering the cost of running Congress by 30%. No, I mean, it literally is that simple. The
construction costs you're talking about on a new building or a new project is about 2% more. 2-3%.
7% for being able to lower those things by about 40 to 60%. If you go to what was it? It was 6.8%.
Now, some of the projects that I've done that are certified in this state, my return on investment, or my break even, I should say, is about month 18. Month 18.
Okay, but
that years.
So I think one of the parts of the educational problem, just listening to you folks, and I hope my staff's writing all this down, is that there needs to be some way to close the gap between and the construction cost between what it costs for conventional building and what it costs to do the green.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were talking about a minute ago seems to me is some kinds of state, local, and federal tax incentives to narrow that gap, or some method of encouraging the contractors like your neighbor to say, okay, it's going to be just as beneficial for me to go ahead and build in a green way as opposed to doing it conventional.
And especially
that's what we need to think about, is how you can encourage it in a way that everybody works on the bottom line, profitability. When you're talking about the free enterprise system, which is what people are arguing about right now, but when you're talking about the free enterprise system, the guy that's producing the product, whether it's a car, house, or whatever it is, he's looking at that bottom line. And if you can figure out a way to make sure that the things you're talking about are equitable for him or her, then they'll do it. And that's why I say I will join the caucus. You may rest assured on that. But in addition to that, I would like to know, and you may not have the answer today, what incentives we could create governmentally, politically, at the state, federal, and local levels that would encourage and narrow this gap so people would do it.
Yeah, and I know a lot more people will do it. Right now, I'm bearing the cost.
Sorry, we're interrupting you.
As a builder, I bear the cost right now. Okay, and what I mean by that is that there is zero incentives in Indiana. Indiana, well, there's $2,000, that's it, for energy efficiency, being Energy Star. There's hardly any incentives whatsoever in Indiana. No reason why.
We're the state level.
State. Yeah, we're 49th out of 50 for being green. Matter of fact, just on the solar panels, on the last project I did for the solar panels, I was looking at about $60,000. If I lived in California and was doing it in California, it would have cost me about $12,000. That's a huge difference. There's no way I can look at some of these alternative energy sources because of our state and local environments.
There's tricks to begin with the foreclosure. There's tricks to begin to pull the tax base up. There's the increase in, you pay 3% more in construction costs, but you retain your value at 7 to 8% higher than an equivalent square footage house. There's huge amounts of things that can be done using green as a tool to solve problems where you're actually getting a return on the investment. So you're investing 7% or 3% in a construction cost, to receive the benefit later. And there's some stuff, I was talking to Murray, I can get a hold of your guys and stuff like that.
But the bottom line is that at the beginning, at the outset, when construction takes place, you're down the road. I mean, you could say to a guy that's building a building 5 years from now, this is going to be saving 10%, 15%. He didn't care about that.
Right.
He cares about the profitability at the construction side, the front end.
But for some state-owned buildings and schools, publicly funded buildings, that should matter.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about legislative initiatives at the state, federal, and local level that could be a combination of tax incentives or whatever to encourage and make sure that the contractor, the person who's bidding on the project, whether it's a house, a commercial building, school, whatever it is, that they know that they're going to be able to make the same amount of money, or maybe even a little bit more if they go in an environmentally safe way. That's the sales job that I think all of you who are into this need to do. You need to convince the governor, and I think he's convincible. I already know that.
Well, he issued an executive order 2 months ago.
Okay, well, I'm a little behind schedule.
We'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to
That's okay.
take away the initiative from each one of these panels, but I think these roundtable discussions sometimes are just as productive or more productive than just listening to my speeches. Anyway, go ahead. You gentlemen have something else?
Well, I appreciate this discussion. It's a discussion that's been going on for a long time. I know I participated in an effort called the Greening of the White House in 1993, 15 years ago, and that led to the greening of the Pentagon, and eventually led to the fact that all 12 major federal agencies that build federal buildings and maintain federal buildings require LEED Silver or better for federal buildings. So there's 2 federal building projects in town right now that are pursuing LEED Silver. Mm-hmm. So the federal government, at least the people that maintain the federal government buildings, understand the benefits of this type of grading system. And I think where we could use some help is on the alternative energy side, and encouraging all states to have an alternative energy portfolio where a certain percentage of the power that's generated in the state is generated from renewable energy. That'd be very helpful across the whole country to generate that whole industry and make it a good investment for that industry. But I wanted to show you some projects in Indiana and elsewhere that demonstrate something that we fight all the time, is that green building is too expensive and it's flaky, it's weird. You can't do it with public projects, but most of my projects are financed by tax money. This is an example of a library project in southern Indiana that's about completed. And the budget here was very restricted. They had a budget of $140 a square foot, a very small branch in a very small town. But this is 100% paid for by grants and donations, no tax money involved. $140 a square foot. They have geothermal heating and cooling system, very energy efficient building envelope, and then solar electric power panels that form the roof of a pavilion that's next to an elementary school's outdoor learning lab. And it's out in the sun, the building's in the shade, it's designed like an old Carnegie building where you get natural daylight, natural ventilation. So here's an example of a building that will have net zero energy. It'll make as much energy on site as it uses on site at that budget level. And part of the money that funded this project was actually federal money through the HUD IOCRA program, and then the state administers that program. The state also has a grant program for alternative energy. It's called the Alternative Power and Energy Grant Program, and this qualified for a $24,000 grant for the solar panels. So this is an example of collaboration between the library district here, the school corporation here, and the small town of Christney coming together to raise money to provide this building at no cost to the local taxpayers. This is an example of a building here in Indianapolis. It's the first LEED certified project in Indianapolis, a very small renovation project of an existing building downtown. They kept very careful records of what they were spending on the LEED costs, and they figured 1.7% increase in the cost of construction due to LEED. And they tracked their payback on that, and just for the electricity bill alone, they had a 1-year payback, or 100% return on investment per year. And I think many of us here would be very thankful for a steady 100% return on investment for our money. But they're getting that, but they're getting a lot more. They're more likely to attract and retain young employees that feel very strongly about the environment. It's very fresh air, it's very comfortable, it's full of daylight, so their absenteeism will probably be reduced, they'll have higher productivity. So in many ways, the savings in electricity are minuscule in terms of their savings on other costs. And final example here, this is not in Indiana, but this is one that we'd like to convince more people in Indiana to do this with existing buildings. This is the headquarters of Adobe in California. They spent $1.4 million on, they identified 64 improvement projects. They got $389,000 in rebates from their utility company. And their annual savings are $1.2 million. So less than a year payback, 121% return on investment. They got the highest level LEED rating, platinum. And I don't know how any investor could look at that and say, LEED is a bad idea, or LEED costs too much money. I mean, what other investment could the state or federal government or corporations do to produce that kind of steady return on their investment that will keep growing if energy costs continue to increase? So to me, this is like the ultimate no-brainer, but the gap is this huge education gap. And I don't know what can be done at the legislative level, but there's a huge gap in knowledge about this that people don't understand the opportunity that's out there. And this helps us in so many ways with our energy security, with not shipping all that $700 billion offshore, and with the health of the employees, the asthma rates we have in buildings, the retention of employees and attracting people to businesses. The list of things that are included in this are amazing and ever growing. And the other educational aspect of this, the other gap, is that the reason U.S. Green Building Council was formed here in Indiana is to educate professionals about how to do this. You go to California or the Chicago area or other places that have been doing this for a while, and the costs keep going down as people learn more and more how to do this. And as contractors get used to this, as the vendors get used to this, and the suppliers get used to this idea, it keeps going down in cost. And so we're seeing that in those areas where they've had a lot of LEED projects for a long time, that this is something that people are learning more of. In Indiana right now, this is a $1 billion industry. There's $1 billion worth of LEED registered projects in Indiana right now. They're seeking some sort of certification. So there's that aspect of it also, that it is creating new types of jobs, new types of professional skills. And so the opportunity is there. And I'll let an engineer talk about that for a moment.
Okay. One of the things, and I don't think either one of them really touched on it, that draws me towards the USGBC and LEED, and as well as the rest of my company, is that it's a third-party certification. A lot of the other ones that are out there, you can kind of self-certify, but nobody's really checking to make sure that it really got done. And with this, it is a third party, and you do have to pay a small amount to keep that service going for people to check that, but it's definitely worth it. I was just talking to someone who is basically a facilities director for their church, but they also happen to be in this industry. But they had their church hat on, and they were walking through the job and noticed that somebody had approved a radical change in the heating and cooling system that's, well, in his mind, is probably going to make it not work, but it just shows he's in charge of this whole thing and he didn't know about it. And little things like that happen all the time, and the green just gets engineered, or not, well, gets value engineered out and out and out, and that's a very bad thing. And you can't do that. If you got a LEED project and you're going to value engineer something out that's going to significantly affect the energy use of the building, they're going to lose their LEED rating system. Nobody wants to be the guy that lost the LEED certification for the building. And so it gives some accountability to everybody to stay on path and to do what everybody's agreed on. That's a big point, I think, that needs to be made. Another point, when we talk about what can be done in the state, and until a few years ago, I was mostly operating in Ohio, and now I'm in Indiana. I was in Lawrenceburg, down south in the southeast. Now I just moved here a couple months ago. The energy code for Indiana is the 2000 Indiana Energy Code, but it's based on the 1992 model energy code. It's significantly behind where most of the rest of the country is. Most of the rest of the country is on the 2004 version of the ASHRAE standard 90.1. LEED with the new 2009 version that's going to be adopted shortly is going to require the 2007 version as its baseline. Now it's the 2004 right now, but that next step is about to be taken, and I kind of see Indiana just kind of wallowing down here in terms of energy code, and so that's something I really think ought to be updated. The building code has just been updated, but the energy code was kind of skipped over in that. Chapter 13 of the building code is the energy code, and it was eliminated from the update. So,
and that's a significant thing, because we know that not all new projects in Indiana are going to pursue LEED, but the basic energy code, the requirement of legal requirement of buildings in Indiana were brought up to a modern standard. 1992 is now more than 15 years ago. That affects everything, and that really has an even more dramatic impact than.
Now that's going to have to be done legislatively in the state legislature.
No, it's the building commission.
It can be done by the.
I can address that when.
Okay, all right. Mr.
that's just something that I saw coming in from Ohio a few years ago. And being an engineer, when we get involved in these projects, which we're involved in quite a few, energy is really where we're focusing on a lot of the time, and just getting to that first step sometimes can be an issue in Indiana where it wasn't, say, in Ohio or even in Kentucky. We were doing a job there, which I was surprised. Truthfully, I was surprised at that. To give you another example, a hospital is a fairly difficult thing when you start looking at energy use, because hospitals use a lot of energy. When you're going through a process like this with your design professional, you've got energy modeling where they can look at different cases and try to help figure out what payback of doing different things on the building to help energy will be. And I don't know that I really want to bore you with a whole bunch of details, but on a real quick one on this hospital, which was in southern Indiana, the talk was that, well, we'll pay an extra $200,000 to put triple pane windows in our building, because that'll save us a bunch of energy, right? Well, because of a lot of things that having to do with the hospital, I modeled that, and it actually cost more energy to put the triple pane windows in. It was going to cost more energy per year. So you've got to have some analysis being done to figure these kinds of things out. The reason for that was because with the worst windows, you were getting more benefit of the sun heating the room up in the wintertime than you were losing in the summer having to cool it. That would not happen in most buildings, but it happened in the hospital because there's a certain amount of air you're always running through there, and because of the system type, that it worked out that way. My point is that it requires analysis, and it's not just something you can just throw at it. And, you can't just throw money at it to make it good. What we ended up doing on that hospital to save a significant amount of energy for, to help the LEED rating system, and that's part of it. They wanted to save the energy, and this actually had a less than 10-year payback, so they went ahead and did it. It's a special piece of equipment that's doing some heating and cooling at the same time, and you're using both the heating and the cooling and not just wasting it outside. But like I said, I don't want to get into a bunch of engineering.
Well, I'd like to ask one more quick question. Is this subjective? I mean, how does this LEED scorecard that you have that makes one better than the other and silver, whatever they...
It's based on industry standards.
I know, but I mean, this is what he's talking about there, whether you use triple panes or double panes, everything. That's an engineering decision there. And the people who make who work on this rating system, how do they factor that in? I mean, do you have engineers that make these determinations for LEEDs?
Well, let me explain how the points associated with the energy use work real quick. That might kind of bring it into focus. You start with a baseline, which is that ASHRAE 2004 standard that I said that most of the country is using as their energy code. That's effectively the worst building you can build. And then you do a model on yours and figure out where the cost is relative to this, and it's hopefully going to be less cost. And if it's, say, 14% less cost, you get 2 points. And if it's 35% less cost, you get significantly more points. And what you're trying to do is look at these points and balance where the costs kind of go. But And then when we talk about silver, there's a certified level, silver, gold. It's all having to do with how many points you actually achieve.
Yeah, I understand that. I think somebody's going to have to put this in writing for me so I can talk to my colleaagues about it.
Can I chip in real quick?
Yes, sir.
I think you're fighting something here. You need some context. LEED itself is very little that I would term subjective. It's pretty straightforward. You accomplish this feature within a building, you get a point. You don't get a point. All right?
I understand, but I mean...
Okay, what I'm driving at, though, is what our friend in front is describing is the difference between a hospital, a school, a house. There are 70 different variables that play in the performance of a hospital, and 15, say, that go into a house. They're different creatures fundamentally. So what happens to us as design professionals is when we have to design a hospital, we have to be aware of those relationships and apply them within LEED to search for an optimum solution. Does that make sense?
But there's a percentage of energy efficiency. The higher the energy efficiency, the more points you score. Up to 10 points on most of the systems.
And it's important to know that LEED does not create any of its own rules. It uses, John's referring to ASHRAE, which is the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers. It uses existing codes and things, and it's all based on off-the-shelf technology. There is no, you got to get the magic stuff. It's all built on existing infrastructure of ways to measure performance.
Well, it becomes a... Jack, going through the certification process, we used a third-party rater who audited everything, checked everything out, and tested the actual building. Literally came in with the building and took the thermogun scan, and then did blower door tests. They actually test the efficiencies of the entire building. So it was actually third-party rated. We didn't have any affiliation with this person. I mean, they've got so intrusive to know where the fly ash came from my cement. I had to give, just on my foundation alone, I had to give them a 26-page report on everything. So it is very comprehensive. However, in stating that, though, it's a third-party audit rating and an evaluator that comes in.
So it's not really subjective. They do it pretty scientific.
Yes, they do.
And it's a team concept, and I think that's key to this. Is it's a process change. We're on the development side, so we team up with other professionals, the architects and the engineers. It's really getting everybody in the same room and talking about the strategies that are implemented in LEED, and it's trade-offs. So you're trying to trade off one strategy potentially against another. We've seen cases where the investment in the windows cost you more, but you were able to save on your heating and cooling because of that, depending on where you are geographically. So I think that's part of what at least we struggle with in our side of the industry, is that we see it from an engineer's perspective a lot. Hey, it's a checklist and you go through, but it's really a process change. It's getting everybody together, all the players together at the beginning to determine what the strategies are that you're going to implement in the building.
It's changing a lot of the way traditional building is done. Architects are used to designing everything and handing it off to their engineering staff, and eventually you create a big stack of drawings and it goes out for bids, competitive bids from, could be the whole market of general contractors. And the green building process is changing that. It's integrating those players more and more so that you optimize, the design gets optimized, the systems get optimized, and the construction gets optimized. And then when the building gets occupied, part of the green building process is you train those facility managers. This is how the systems work, and this is how to maintain their performance. And so it's a very holistic approach to...
It's a lot of quality management.
Yeah. Which has never been done in buildings. I mean, it's always been this linear process. And so it's changing the market significantly.
I think it's an educational process, and I think we can all, at all levels of government and the private sector, if we work together, we could probably...
But imagine if you could create a 30% improvement on energy efficiency.
I know, I saw your figures.
I mean, that's
very low, by the way. That's very low on all the stuff.
That's just by today's,
I know.
basic.
Our fair minimum is at least 50%, and we're going up to 80%
Those are-
reduction in savings.
Those are homes, is that what
Yeah.
you said? Yeah.
And even on some of the commercial stuff that we're doing, I mean, we're able to reduce it quite a bit. I mean, so you're being very conservative on those numbers.
The future trend is net positive energy, where your building is producing more energy than you're using.
Fortunately, because of the environment in Indiana, we can't, it's very difficult to do that because of, you know, the upfront cost. You know, again, no tax incentives. You know, if it was California, no problem.
Well, I know we got a gentleman who's going to talk about this in just a minute, but I think the legislators, my former chief of staff is a state senator, my brother's a state representative, and I'll be happy to get all this information to them, and you can convince them, as well as, you know, working with the governor, to pass some legislation dealing with tax incentives at the state level. That would probably be one of your giant steps forward, I presume.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Can I ask a related question?
Yeah.
You know, I think we're kind of thinking that energy, like electricity produced in Indiana, obviously is 97% coal-fired. And looking into the future with emissions criteria, carbon caps, and things like that, do you see, you know, what can we do in Indiana? I mean, obviously, building more efficient buildings is a significant help to that. But what other?
You're getting into a real political issue right now. I'll just tell you that I'm convinced no matter who becomes the next president or what the makeup is of the Congress of the United States, House and Senate, I think you're going to see movement toward all forms of energy development. You're going to see nuclear, you're going to see coal fire, you're going to see coal shale conversion, you're going to see more oil drilling, gas drilling, and there's going to be it's going to be all this together that will take place. And I know some people have some concerns about nuclear, and some about coal shale, and some about drilling for oil and gas. But I think it's going to be, everything's going to be looked at, and I think you're going to see it's all of the above in some fashion or another. It may not be everything that I would like. For instance, I was co-sponsor of a energy bill with Neil Abercrombie of Hawaii. We had 24 members of Congress that were co-sponsoring this bipartisan bill. And I have been for drilling in the Anwar. You may not agree with that, but I've been for that because for a number of reasons. I won't go into all those. But he was against it, and a lot of the Democrats were against it, and a lot of the Republicans were for it. So we left Anwar out. And so what we did is we started looking at the things that we could agree upon, and we came up with a number of the things that I just mentioned. I think that's what's going to happen in the future because the American people are demanding it. They're demanding more energy independence and using all forms of energy. And so that's why what you folks are talking about today fits right in, because the $700 billion we're sending overseas, you know, everybody sees what we're doing right now with the deficit. We're up to $11-12 trillion, and it's going to get worse. We're going to have to start economizing as far as our expenses are concerned, and that's one way we can do it, is here at home. So what you're doing in conjunction with the new energy approaches we're going to take, I think will help solve some of that problem. Should we bring the next panel up, and then if you guys don't mind staying around, we'll continue on with this discussion.
I wanted to make one comment on this while this slide is up. This is the largest building you can do this with in Indiana because there's a net metering law that if this building produces more energy than it uses, that can be sent back through the meter to the power company. But they only get paid back for that up to a 10 kilowatt limit. So
that needs to be changed.
In other states, for example, Ohio doesn't have that 10 kilowatt limit. It's unlimited. In Illinois, it's 20 kilowatt. But this won't work for businesses because of that net metering limit. So that's something that should be looked at. I can't do a bigger building and get...
Well, we've got somebody from the governor's office, I guess, here. We can talk to you about that. Is that right?
The scope just keeps getting bigger.
If I may, a couple of housekeeping things. I'm Dave Forsell with Keep Indianapolis Beautiful. Welcome to our headquarters. We think we'll be LEED Gold. Our mission is uniting people to beautify the city, to improve the environment, and to foster community pride. On an annual basis, we have about 35,000 people volunteer with us on about 400 projects. this building was something that we felt was really important to do. Very interesting. Our utility bills right now are less than $1,000 a month for 25,000 square feet. That's pretty good. So we're really excited about that. Now we'll see how it goes in the wintertime. But I just wanted to make sure you all knew restrooms. At either of these doors you can use and go right down the hall and find the restrooms without any problem. And please, Congressman, thank you so much that you chose this place to have this.
I saw my first waterless.
Waterless urinal. That's right. Happy to maybe show you around if you have a few minutes after today.
Sure.
All right.
Okay, our next panel, why don't we have you come on up? What is it?
Is anybody else needing
This is
the
for
projector?
We better find out what I want to do.
Yeah.
Okay, our next panel, Lisa Diedrich. Oh.